So I'm trying to find a pot that I can put my winter plants in, and I've emptied out that pot there only to discover all these bulbs, which was incredibly wonderful. Is that they're all, look, sprouting, which is fantastic. So I'm just going to cover them over. What I need to get better at is my pots of bulbs. I need to put markers on so I know what they are. That's what I need to do. And exactly the same thing happened with this pot. I found these bulbs, which again I'm not sure what they are. I think they're a bit of a mix, but I think I need to do a bigger pot with that actually. So this one is one of my herb pots, but it's been taken over by other things. So I'm going to use this one, I think. Looks like it's got a few cracks on it. So after I spent some time looking for a pot, most of which I found were actually being used for something else that I'd possibly forgotten about, I then went into the front garden to do some clearing up. Now, the one thing that I find with my pots is that, well, I plant them all up with bulbs, and then once I've finished, I move them around the back of the garden in my sort of working area, and then I leave them out, and then come springtime, I go down the end of the garden, I remove the leaves from the top, pull up any weeds, and then I move the pots round to the front garden. And I've done that for the sort of last few years. You can see here that there's some bits that I just need to cut back and sort out. And you see that planter, that's been there now for about 5 years, 6 years. Someone gave it to me. They were clearing their grandparents' house, and there were loads of pots and containers, and that's just one that I've never used. So I might get rid of that. I've not decided yet. I think that might have some bulbs in it as well, so I might just move it around the end of the garden and just see what happens with it. This is the next door neighbour's blackberry bush. Rather than pay for privet, which is what I've put in on the right of the picture, she didn't want to pay for privet because privet bushes are quite expensive. So she got a blackberry bush. Now that has given me quite a lot of blackberries, which is very nice, but it has sent out runners, hits you when you get out of the car, catches on your clothes when you get out of the car. So it really is a bit of a pain. So I had decided, now blackberry season's over, to cut that right back. Also, you can see that I've got part of a bird table there in the picture. That is because I had decided to get rid of this. I got that for my 30th birthday. It rotted quite badly. My father-in-law said that he would fix it, but that's never happened. And I don't have a top to it, and I just decided I was going to get rid of it. But then someone else convinced me, no, you need to keep hold of it. So at the moment it's still sitting there. So I cut back quite a lot, and you can see where on the right of the picture, last time I weeded up to that bird stand feeder. So the bit where I'm now standing, that bit all needs to be weeded and cut back. It's quite incredible that when I weed this, it just makes the drive in the garden look so much bigger, which is nice. And in a minute, you're going to see me starting to dig into my borders. Now, at the moment, it's still quite bright and fairly mild here in Norfolk. If it was cold, I would not be doing that because of the insects and the disrupting wildlife. But at the moment, it's still okay to clear the garden. Once it gets closer to really cold temperatures and frost, then you really shouldn't be clearing the garden and removing the leaves until springtime, because it really can impact wildlife which rely on those insects very early in the year, particularly some of our small birds. So I do love going in the garden, but I just haven't had so much time this year to spend in the garden. I do quite a lot of work, but also I've been trying to tackle the house, as many of you are aware of. And my thought is the clearer that I get the house, the more organised and sorted I get the house, the more I will have time to spend in the garden. So the reason why I wanted to dig this out is a number of different things going on here. So when we first bought the house, the garden was absolutely full of one of my favourite plants, which is lupins. Mostly pink lupins and mostly purple and a few pink. I've also had a yellow one bought for me, a black one bought for me. But at the moment, for some reason, they're not surviving very well. Now, lupins don't like a lot of care and a lot of fuss. But I think it's largely because there are plants in my borders that have just taken over. So the goldenrod has spread. They send out runners and that has spread massively across all of my border. Now my borders aren't that big, so I really cannot have too much goldenrod because it's very tall and quickly bushes out. Also, a lot of my little daisies, my small Michaelmas daisies, they again send runners underground and then go up, and they have spread, very quickly. So what I was doing here was I was digging over, trying to get the roots of the goldenrod out, some roots of the Michaelmas daisies, really cut some of this back and clear some of this back. And at the same time, any bulbs I found, I've got some lovely white daisies that I want to keep. I was then putting in a pot and putting to one side so I could replant them. But I'm not going to replant them straight away. I'm going to wait until that soil is settled and just see if there's any other weeds or any other bits and pieces I need to pull up, and then I'm going to put the bulbs in. And I'm also going to put in my new bulbs. So I'm hoping there'll be plenty of space for a spring display. Whereas the last couple of years, the bulbs have really struggled to get through all the roots of the other plants which have taken over. I do shake all the soil, but I end up putting quite a lot of the soil in the brown bin as well, just because there's so much. The roots are so tightly kind of together. There's also a Chinese dragon in here. There was someone that we knew when we were newly married. He ran a shop in Norwich city centre, selling all different products from China that had been imported, and he gave us 2 lions. I wasn't quite sure what to do with them because they weren't really my cup of tea, but in the end they sat in the garden. So they have survived around 20 frosts. I noticed that the one that's left has now got a broken leg. I also found several terracotta army figures that we brought back from China. We spent a month in China back in 2008. Well, 3 weeks in China and 1 week in Dubai. And we bought a few different things. And a while ago, I didn't want them in the house anymore, so I stood them in the garden. But I'd completely forgotten about them until I was digging this over. And I thought to myself, if ever I moved away from this house and someone found these little terracotta figures, what fun it would be for them. A little bit like when I was a little girl in my mum and dad's house and I found some pottery with lovely little rabbits on. I was quite excited about that. I also try to go along all the edges. We've put a liner down where the shingle is on top of the liner, but now that liner has been in place for so long, we are now getting quite a lot of weeds in the stones, which unfortunately you can't do that much about, and I won't use weed killer. So that does involve me going out and weeding every so often. I can't bear these very severely strong chemicals that kill insects and kill other plants. I won't use them in my garden. The other thing that I'd become aware of, I've always maintained my garden and had my front garden exactly as I wanted it, but quite a few years ago my dad got me some lavender. And I didn't ask for the lavender, but he bought me some lavender and he put it in the garden because he said it was good for the bees, which I agree with him, but it has spread massively. So now it goes right over the stones, and again, it's really stopping some of my other plants from growing. So in this video, I cut that right back, not all of it, because I've got several bits to do. But I cut back some of it, and I'm going to try and cut the plant in half, trying not to kill it, But now my gladioli are coming up through the lavender, and I have lost some of my favourite lupins because the lavender has got so big. You can see here my husband is helping me because it was a real struggle to get through the soil, even though the soil is still lovely and soft. Because of the roots was so tightly impacted, it was really hard to do. So he loosened up some of the areas for me. I know some of you might be wondering about me not wearing gloves. I do have gardening gloves, I just don't like wearing them. It does mean that your hands get very dirty and your nails get quite dirty. But after a couple of days, that all soon tidies up, cleans up, and your nails look fine again. I also find that when you constantly washing your hands or washing up and busy in the house, and the hands don't stay rough for very long. The only problem is if you're gardening and then I'm going to work the next day, if anyone then sees my nails, because they do look quite so bad, even if you use a scrubbing brush. My mum always says to me, why don't you use gloves? But there's something about the soil. I like going through this. I like touching the soil and actually feeling it. When you've got gloves on, I find it quite difficult to do things. Even when the gloves are really those fine ones, I still find it quite tricky. So bearing in mind the video is times, increased speed by 5 times, and this is a tiny area of my garden, I don't get much digging done. I really need to do this for the whole border. Now my dear neighbour that I've mentioned a few times, he passed away sort of probably about 18 months ago now, he used to regularly come over and cut our grass, which is very kind of him. And he used to also sometimes do the edges. But unfortunately, I would have never said this to him, but unfortunately what sometimes he would do is he'd cut the edges and then all of the soil he'd put into the border. And he said, oh, that doesn't matter, that'll all sort itself out. But what happened was I got a lot of grass grow in the border. So the edges always looked really lovely, but I got so much grass grow in the border, it made it quite hard. So when you see me cutting the lavender back, what I also try to do is save some, because I thought to myself this could be a nice activity to do with my girl guides, which makes me think, I'm trying to think where I actually put the lavender to dry out. I hope I haven't left it outside. But I thought it would be a nice activity to do with my girl guides because they can make some little lavender bags, maybe for Christmas presents, for mums, aunts, nannies, even dads and granddads, but generally the women would probably appreciate little lavender bags to put in their chest of drawers. So I cut back the lavender as hard as I can. The clippers were taking me too long, so I used the shears, and the lavender probably halved in size, but I still have quite a lot more to do. When plants are slowly growing and spreading though, you don't really see it happen, do you? It's just I looked this autumn and I thought, oh my goodness, everything looks so overgrown. I really need to cut everything back, and my mum noticed it. She said, oh goodness me, you've cut some of the goldenrod. The goldenrod had got a bit out of control. I said, yeah, I know, it's spread across the whole of my borders. My border on the other side used to be the same width, but now it's tiny, and that's because my hedge has got out of control as well. But I can't cut my hedge. My hedge is too big for me to do. I'd quite like to get it like how my mum's hedges are. My mum's hedges are about 5.5 feet tall and about no more than 1 feet wide, and they're manageable, whereas mine's probably 6 foot tall and getting on to be 6 foot wide. So another job that I need to do in the garden in the next couple of weeks is my lawn. And I was really pleased that my birthday present, I got 2 containers, one from my sister and one from my husband, of the Patch Magic. It's a good quality, good brand, but I need to do a weed and feed on my grass. I need to dig out some of the weeds, I need to give it a good feed, and this is perfect sort of timing to really kind of do that. And then get ready for springtime, where I will then sprinkle some seeds on the grass. And actually it's quite good timing because I had a fire recently in the back garden for Guy Fawkes night, and that will mean that I'll have a big patch on my grass where again I need to reseed. So the other jobs that I need to do in the front garden are to cut my buddleia right back. I know lots of people love buddleia and it is really good for the butterflies. Oh, but my goodness, it grows like a weed and it's so powerful. It can really like damage your walls and edgings and all sorts. I've also got a hawthorn in the garden, which the top needs to get cut off. So I've kept it all quite nicely trimmed on the sides, but I need to get a ladder out and cut the top. Because those thorns are like so painful if you get them in your hands. That's a job that I've kind of avoided doing. But again, it's got quite big, so I do need to tackle that at some point soon. And I also need to cut the edges of the grass. Now, someone said to me, my neighbour said to me, grass looks nothing if you don't do the edges. So at the moment, I don't need to cut the grass, but I do need to go around and just tighten up the edges. The plant in the middle of the screen at the moment, I think that's some sort of lily. I've got all those leaves that have grown. It's gone a bit crazy. It's got quite big, but didn't flower this last year, and I'm really not sure what it is. The other thing that I want to do in these borders is over the course of the last year, in one of my trays in the greenhouse, I've been growing more lupins. Now they're supposed to be a whole range of different colours, but often lupins do revert to being purple. They're quite strange. They go back to their kind of main sort of dominant colour, that seems. So I have had pink lupins. Then after a couple of years, they then suddenly start flowering purple. But I'm going to put a lot of them in my borders. So I'm going to put the bulbs back in that I've dug out. I'm going to put new bulbs in because I've bought some bulbs with some of my voucher money. And then I'm also going to put my lupins in. So I'm really wanting to take this border back to a bit more of how it was like when we first bought the house, which was the purpley daisies, which are lovely. They flower this sort of time of the year. So when lots of the other colours have disappeared from the garden, you get all this mass of little daisies. They are lovely, but you can see that at the moment on that screen, they're covering like 3/4 of the screen because of how they've spread. I really want to keep them in one central area. I don't want borders that are just lavender, goldenrod and Michaelmas daisies. You can see how my stones get absolutely full of weeds. I do this on quite a regular basis. It's funny how if I was going to try and grow plants in stones, they wouldn't grow, would they? But, you know, when you don't want them to grow, they do grow. The funny thing was, a few years ago, I did a test with this. I got some lupin seeds. I tried to grow some lupin seeds in soil, and they hadn't been very successful. I think I'd probably watered them a bit too much. I've probably been a bit too kind to them because lupins don't really like kindness. So one year I got a load of lupin seeds and I threw them down in the stones. And do you know I had about 20 plants come up? But yeah, my lupins that are currently in a tray, I need to remove them from the tray and repot them all. At the moment, I've got my greenhouse on a timer. So it's coming on in the morning and in the evening. That's going to be changed as we approach sort of the colder months in winter. But what I must remember to do is I must remember to water them while they are in the greenhouse. That's a problem of mine. It's a little bit like how on my other channel where I say about how I leave my washing in the washing machine. I can easily forget not to water the things in the greenhouse in the colder months. Just because I'm not going outside so regularly and I just don't think about doing it. Lots of leaves here from the bush there on the left, and as soon as I swept all those round and put them all in the green bucket, this whole area looked so much better and opened up so much more. But I am gonna order more shingle. I've got that patch outside my window that still hasn't been repaired, so we've pulled all the stones back. We need to cover it with that sort of sheeting, the weed preventer. And then I probably need, I don't know, another ton of stones. So I'm looking to get that ordered in the next couple of weeks. And of course, when I pick the weeds up, you can't help but also pick some shingle up at the same time. It's just really what happens. And we end up getting shingle in our stones that then gets brought into the house, that gets brought into the car. So it's quite easy to lose shingle out on the path and on the road. So we last had it done, about 15 years ago, 14 years ago. So it does make sense to get another delivery. And of course, by having a thick bed of shingle, you don't end up rucking up the sheeting that I'm going to put underneath to prevent the weeds. I also find that by my wall and the pavement, which you can now see on the left of the screen, people come along with their dogs. Dogs did go for a wee, and that then creates a whole area which is full of weeds as well. You know, the dog's wee is providing a little bit of, I don't know, because the rain is obviously there as well, but it just seems that the dogs do impact. I get more weeds in that area. Just one of those things, really. I looked the other day and I was actually weeding in the garden and I heard something on my stones, and I actually really like dogs, but I like dogs that have well-behaved owners. I know some of you will be laughing at that. Dogs aren't naughty, it's the owners. And I looked up and they were on this loose lead and they'd let the dog come into my garden for about like 3 metres. So not controlling the dog. And then here in this video you can see me putting together my winter planter. I really enjoyed doing this. So it's an autumnal planter, but the colours that I've chosen will mean that it's going to be great for Christmas too. So I chose a shrub that had got like a pink edging on the leaf that was very pretty. I chose those cyclamen mixed colours, and for my autumn and kind of Halloween time planter, you'll see that I added a tiny little pumpkin and a gourd. And then what I will do is when sort of autumn moves into winter and we get closer to Christmas, I'll replace the gourd with some Christmas items like some pine cones. And I've also got some plastic gourds on sticks. You might have seen me mend one of those on my other channel. And I will take them out and I will replace them with pine cones, with some perhaps sort of poinsettia type flowers, and maybe some Christmas type ribbons. So that's kind of dual purpose. It will go from an autumnal planter to a Christmas planter. Now, often as I'm going about my garden, I do smile to myself because this whole thing about, you know, originally on my other channel, I was trying to get tidier, and then actually I realised that I needed to declutter. Thanks to the advice and kind of guidance that people have given me, I go around my garden and see that I often have the same problem, that I need to declutter, I need to remove things. So you can see when I then put my planter there are things that are just sitting there and I think, well, I don't need all this on my doorstep. I love collecting stones and pebbles and shells from different places, but can soon create very much of a cluttered space. I'd got a little jug there, which says something like belle fleur or something, beautiful flower. I decided I didn't want that, so I actually put that next to my wall outside on the street. So somebody a couple of days later took that, and then I just decided to sweep round and have a general tidy up. I did think about removing my little gnome and putting him somewhere else, but at the moment he's still staying there. And then either side of my gnome I've got 2 little birds, which again I might decide to move. And then when I looked back on my photos as I was finishing off, I saw those weeds. Now what I also need to do at some point, I've got a list a mile long, honestly I have. I need to pull all the stones back from that white edge and I need to repaint. But that's going to be a job maybe for springtime now, because the whole of the house needs to be repainted. So that really brings me to the end of my video, my gardening video. I hope you've enjoyed it. Thank you very much for following me on this new channel. And If you're just here and you're interested in knowing a little bit more about my life, you can also find me on my video Getting Tidier. Otherwise, thanks a lot for following me. Please add any comments about ideas and suggestions and things that you're going to be doing in your own garden or ideas for me. And I'll see you next time. Bye.